that's the original Reston Comprehensive Plan. And there's Robert Simon. This was a big deal in the 60s. The First Lady came here. The President was interested in Reston, interested in this vision of a complete community. Equity was important from the very beginning. And there were 7 principles that came out. The housing for all, that was very unique for the day, and they meant but for all, ages, incomes, residents to live, work, and play in the same place. This is this complete community idea. A lot of attention on the individual as the focal point of planning, as opposed to roads or some other version of public facility. Attachment to nature, accommodation, leisure time. This is the whole active living recreation perspective. And amenities starting with a library, golf courses with an S, art, and more. And then, of course, Robert Simon was a developer. Financial success was important. So now, what we have in the first section are we do have a new set of principles, and they're a little bit different than before, more detailed primarily. We have equity and health are new. We also had more detail in just the land use aspect of it, spelling out the difference between the quarter cities, the transit station areas, the village centers, the neighborhoods. That's all spelled out in the new principles. And so that's the first section. Now we get into the meat of the document, which are the planning elements. So I'm going to go through all of these. These are the chapters very briefly. So land use and design, a lot of time spent on that. This is very much from the last document. What's added to this, those numbers, those are the floor area ratios for each of the areas. Oh, you've got a mic.
Yay.
Good. What do you have to give up to for us to use that? Does it work?
Yeah.
Am I, what? Does it work? It doesn't work, so can't expect everything. Does it work now? No? Well, so much for that.
I'll try to get it working.
Okay, so this is the transit corridor. Now, some people, when they talk about the comprehensive plan, they talk about the transit corridor. This plan is more than just the transit corridor. In fact, the population is at least as high in the rest of the neighborhoods compared to what this will be even in the future. So there are three areas of transit, Wheelie, Town Center, and Herndon. This remains pretty much unchanged from the last time. So we start with the Wheelie Station area. It is moving right along. Some of you are watching the various areas. That's the Comstack on the upper left, EYA midline, the upside down building. And it's more than just the buildings. There's open space too. Also part of Comstack, sometimes we forget, is the industrial area. And so far, we're keeping the industrial area as it is. We have what's called site-specific plan amendments. There are going to be plan amendments to try to turn some of these failing office buildings into residential. But the idea is focus the development around the orange area, the transit station, and let it taper down as you move farther away. So then we have the town center station area. That's the larger area, and you see the Fannie Mae project, the one building in the picture pretty well finished. You have the large civic space coming, perhaps a performing arts space, and these are pictures from the various developer schemes. And then some people forget that Herndon is part of this. It used to be Reston Station West, I think, wasn't it, at one time? But I think Metro didn't like our name. So Herndon, quite a lot of density there. Woodland Park has quite a lot of development that's occurred. There's a wetlands there. More development coming Lake Ann. Lake Ann, we pretty much adopted what was done before in Lake Ann. The other village centers, we changed them slightly. And I think we've got that on the next slide. So, there's the three Hunters Woods, South Lakes, North Point. 0.25 FAR, which is about where they are now. The new plan will allow some adjustments to that, up to the 0.25. If a restaurant's putting a kitchen addition on, or somebody wants to expand their store in a slight manner, 0.25 would do it. Now, in this plan, we reduce the density. This is in the future for 13 to 20 dwelling units per acre. That's about where Lake Ann is today. In the blue is the surrounding housing that would be preserved, and there's some affordable housing in those areas, and it provides an opportunity for housing only in the red areas, but only through another comp plan amendment. So there have been a lot of questions about that. Hopefully that's simple and clear presentation on that.
John?
Yes.
With the extension, would there be high-rise buildings at South Lakes?
No. Now, we have to be careful because we're not projecting yet. We're not quite there. We're saying a potential of 13 to 20, so we didn't go much farther than that. So at that density, you're probably not going to have high-rise buildings. Lake Ann does have one, the Heron House, 15 stories, but everything is pretty low-rise. And again, that's a comp plan amendment, so you don't get that automatically. It gives you the opportunity to do that.
John?
Yeah.
You might share the idea that if 20 dwelling units the acre, you're talking garden apartments.
You're talking garden apartments.
If you wanted to go high-rise, you'd be talking 50 units the acre.
Yes,
80
that's
units
right.
the acre.
That's right.
20 units the acre, basically.
That's right.
A garden apartment kind of.
That's right. Yes. And if some of you remember, when we were talking about caps, the thought was maybe you could go to 50 units per acre. This plan says, no, we're not going to do that. So this is a change from the last plan. The last plan also let you go free. You didn't have to do a comp plan amendment. So this time you would have to do a comp plan amendment. Now, there's two other commercial areas. One is the convenience centers. We often forget about those. No housing in these. These are small areas. Important to Reston to have that full range of uses. So we have like the lake house. Not thinking of that as a commercial area, so that pretty much stays the way it is for RA. Hold on. Hidden Creek has a small little office building there. It has a Montessori school. It used to have my doctor in there, actually. I think there are other doctors in there now. Sunrise Valley, that's what you would think of as a village. It has a dentist and some commercial in there. And then probably the best example is the Soapstone that has small amounts of commercial deep in the residential areas, but no residential for those. And then the other two, Bowman Town Green, if you're familiar with that, low-rise buildings along Reston Parkway. If you're coming from here just before you get to Cameron, and then the Home Depot area. So those would stay the way they are, not a possibility for residential on top of that. Yes?
John, I'm the president of the Reston Association. And one of the comments we had about lake houses, the current text, at least the last text that we saw, had lake houses possibly being redeveloped for office. Reston Association has no intention of redeveloping lake houses for office space.
Yes.
And it would be inappropriate
Cut him off.
to have that option in the comprehensive plan. It would disrupt people who spent the money to buy it to preserve it in its current state. So I would hope that in the final draft that you adopt, that option is removed.
Well,
So
maybe
that
make that
so I
clear.
don't- So that I don't get any more phone calls.
Okay. And so I don't get any more phone calls. Yes, we can do that if it's not there already. We have gotten a comment from Larry Butler before. I'm not sure whether we've addressed that yet. Okay, is that clear? So now, oops. Okay, now the residential areas. Like I said, there's as much residential in the rest of Reston as there ever will be in the transit corridor. It's about as photogenic as you can get, the neighborhoods. That is really what a new town was. That kind of mix. We have a mix of even some high-rise, although that one is in the town center. Garden apartments, we have low-rise buildings, single-family detached and attached, in close proximity. That's unheard of in the U.S., certainly unheard of in Fairfax at the time this was developed. We want to hold on to that. But the last plan opened the door for at least 3 areas: St. John's Woods, Fairway Apartments, and Charter Oaks, with the possibility of going to 50 units per acre. Now, the first development came in St. John's Woods, and I think it was almost the end of the free world when that came in. So that's coming down to, again, the 13 to 20 units per acre. The emphasis is on preserving if we're gonna go pretty good density in the transit corridor, we ought to be ratcheting down when it comes to the neighborhoods. We probably should not be proposing major redevelopment of any part of the neighborhoods. So that's the new town vision. You've got the transit corridor, you've got the town center, you've got these village centers, you've got some garden apartments mixed in, and then the single family detached in close proximity. Some planners these days don't even talk about transit-oriented development. They talk about the 20-minute community that you could walk in anywhere in 20 minutes. Yes?
You mentioned Charter Oak and Fairway.
Yes.
Going to 50 units per acre. Is
No.
that off the table?
Well, this plan recommends 13 to 20.
Right. Fairway has that one approved plan. Yeah, you're right.
So that's pretty much it for the land use. Let me check to see if there are some comments. I think this notion of placemaking, and that's something I like to talk about, deserves more attention. So there's a whole section, and some of this is well done from the last plan, so we've just carried it forward. This placemaking, the emphasis on design is part of this land use and design chapter. Yes?
He didn't mention anything about the golf course.
I didn't, and I'll get to that later. That's in the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space. But just so you know, that the golf courses will be what they are today, the golf courses. The language is a little different in this. The words like could, should, maybe, those are, we've kind of weaned ourselves of those mostly. It's still in there a little bit, but we use active verbs, so provide, create, establish, those kinds of words. And the result of that is shortening this from 186 pages to 140 pages, which is still a lot, but when you do it that way, you combine things, and it says what you mean, which I like about that. Okay, let's go on. So now the transportation. We have a very robust transportation section. I won't go through all the details on the transportation plan. We have new streets, 2 new crossings of the toll road, a little bit of widening of Wheelie and Reston Parkway. We have a lot of attention on the bikes and the pedestrians, particularly getting pedestrians across the toll road. Completing the trail system that we have is the focus on that. And let's see. And then we have the famous grid of streets. The grid of streets is tampered down a little bit. We've had a chance to pay more attention to the topography, so we've had to change the grid of streets a little bit. Mostly we retained pretty much the way it is. We have a couple areas that we're already beginning to have testimony on. One is the connection to North Shore Drive that goes on American Greenway, and the other is resolving the connection, the type of connection to Association Drive. So left is Association Drive, probably a little hard to see on the right at North Shore. I anticipate some testimony on that during the public hearing. My favorite thing to talk about is a concern, not so much what the plan says, whether it's this one or that one, but the implementation of it. And I think we're challenged here in Reston. We've spent $6.3 billion to build the metro, but it's very difficult to walk there. We have 9-lane roads to cross. We have 7-lane roads to cross. We've got some lights, maybe not enough. We have lack of sidewalks in the right place. So there's a whole attention, and a lot of this is carried over from the last plan, but getting to metro and completing the bike and particularly the trail system that we already have is all in this plan. So there's a great place-making emphasis. Okay.
Which are the two streets being removed?
What's that? I wasn't sure I heard you.
Which are the two streets being removed?
I didn't hear that.
Which of the two streets being removed?
The streets being removed?
Yes,
I
one
thought
and
you
the
previous, yeah, I just couldn't tell. How about a living room?
I'm not sure that's better. It's a little small.
Right, okay.
One street that's removed is called the Street to Nowhere
Oh, right.
that goes through the golf course. That is gone. In its
Road
place
from nowhere.
is a little more emphasis on wheelie. And then this new road connection that goes from American Greenway. Do you know where that is? Opposite Plaza America.
Yeah.
And it's a connection using American Greenway to North Shore. So there's great discussion about whether that's a good idea. Those on the pro side think, well, that helps the circulation for the whole area. Those on the negative side think that's imposition on the neighborhood. We don't really want to bring that kind of traffic through North Shore and other parts of Reston. Association Drive, which is the left, probably hard to see from there. There's a lot of topography in there, a lot of trees in there. What is the best way to treat that for the future? There is another one of these SSPA's site-specific plan amendments coming, so if we can't resolve it here, that will resolve it. But I'm just trying to upfront with the kinds of testimony that I'm getting so far. Yes?
I live in Polo Field, which is southwest.
Yes.
Fairfax County Parkway in Sunrise Valley. Can't believe you talked through this whole slide and you not once mentioned that you're talking about building a grade separated interchange at that location, which is probably going to require the demolition of several of our neighborhoods' homes. So I looked in the document fairly quickly, and
The
the
intersection
words in
of
there are so generic.
County Parkway and Sunrise.
GSI is not even mentioned. It says context sensitive and considerate of nearby residences. Now, come on, if you're gonna destroy people's homes, you're not gonna mention that?
Did you want to answer that? Okay.
I brought my notes on that because I'm keenly aware how sensitive that is. My name is John Mooney, and I'm wearing this because I have eye surgery tomorrow and I don't want to get cooties. Not that you have cooties, but they're everywhere. So that was very hard fought, hard discussed. And I listened to the Polo Fields community in great detail many times and tried to work out the best possible change we could have in the previous comprehensive plans language. What's in this language is a much stronger community process than there had been before, much stronger. A promise that Fairfax County staff will be engaged at every step of the planning process to see if there are alternatives. And by the way, no money is going to be spent on that intersection until 2038. So we have time to work and find alternatives. That's one thing. We have a strong community process in there. It may seem vague to you, but those words were very, were hammered out with a great dialogue and back and forth. And the final thing I would say is that this is not just that intersection. This is really part of the whole corridor all the way from I-95, So it's the whole sweep of the Fairfax County Parkway and the Springfield, what's the rest of it? The Springfield Parkway, all the way to I-95. And that has been part of the county's plan for a long time. It didn't start with this one intersection. And it's driven by all of the traffic, not just in Fairfax County, not only Reston, not only Fairfax County, but the region. The only solution to it is so we have time. We have until 2038. We have until 2038 to try to find an alternative. I think the alternative has to be careful care that we not allow overdevelopment, and also care that we do as much as possible to become truly multimodal. That is, not depend on cars. That's the only way to prevent that. But this is nothing. This is not just about that beloved intersection and the beloved Polo Fields community. I really understand their concerns. I've talked with them individually, heart to heart about it. But that's the problem. It is part of a whole corridor from I-95 all the way up to Route 7, where it meets outside of Reston. Yep.
Just very quick question. Where is it in the process? They haven't started like the planning documents or anything yet. It's
They
just on the list, and there's no like environmental documentation done or anything yet.
nothing.
Okay.
They've spent none of the money. There's a big spreadsheet for the next 40 years on transportation, and we've spent none of the money on that spreadsheet for this project, whether engineering, certainly not construction. So there's time, but it really, in a sense, depends on us how much we're really willing to work to make this a multimodal community. Otherwise, the pressure to have more and more roads is going to continue.
Yay.
Yep.
What was the intersection again? I never could hear.
It's at the intersection of
Sunrise.
Valley and Fairfax County Parkway. But actually, it's a stretch that goes all the way up to
Thank you.
Hills.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it's really that whole corridor, all sorts of, a number of, they call them grade separated intersections, so that people don't have to stop to go through an intersection. And it's all because of increased traffic. And the only way that will change is if we become multimodal. Yes, ma'am.
So, Association Drive was mentioned, and
I forgot to wear my hearing aids, please.
Association Drive.
It works.
Association Drive, is that the one that will connect to a Soapstone flyover? And what is the status of that?
It's on the grid of streets, which means it has not been laid out officially, and it's still that, you can even see that map, there's a couple different options of what to do with that. But yes, it's to connect to Soapstone Drive.
Okay, that's
And the other way too, towards the Wheeler Metro Station.
So if people will be crossing over, aren't we gonna have a similar amount of traffic that's on Sunset Hills already today? How is that volume going?
What's that? I didn't hear all of that one.
Fairfax County DOT honestly said that widening this corridor from the southeast of the county to the northwest of the county, it will help, but it will also, to some extent, increase traffic and They admitted that honestly, which I really admire. So if you build it, they will come. So the only way to solve this bugger is to really become truly multimodal.
When people comment, would you please repeat their questions to
Sure.
the microphones we
Yes,
have here?
yes. So here, heard a lot of comment about the polo fields and Reston Parkway. I recently went to a presentation on and you can see the presentation on the commission's website. There's lots of improvements around, none of them in Reston. They're all down in Springfield. So this one is not on the radar, even short term, and it's pretty far out there. That would ever happen.
We do have a much better, it may seem vague to you, but having been involved in the hammering out of the details of it, it's a much stronger community process and a commitment to look at alternatives, not just how to build it, but alternatives to building it. There's a commitment in the
10
plan
after 8.
on the part of Fairfax County DOT.
John Mooney,
Yes, ma'am.
gotta go on.
Okay.
Parks, recreation, and open space. I mean, we had a park plan from before. I would say that the last plan emphasized recreation fields. This plan recommends a whole host of things. So across the bottom there is the range. So of course, the natural resources that we have in Reston, we're gonna hold on to those, of course. Indoor facilities, the most famous ones are the Fairfax County Performing Arts Center and the Fairfax County Recreation Center. We have a whole series of signature open spaces. These are the ones that I tend to focus on. So we have 3 miles of open space along the WNOD Trail, so we'll be expanding the WNOD Trail as much as we can, all the way to Sunset Hills, with a series of stopping points along the way. So west there, the number 1 feature, that's the town center area. So it's kind of constrained there, but as each development comes in, they do their part and provide 5 small open spaces next to that. Number 2 is the old Reston Avenue area with the 3 ponds, and there'll be, we're getting quite a bit of dedication along Sunrise Valley there. 3 is the park overlook area. This is the area where you can see out into the golf courses. This perhaps an area of the Garden of Remembrance, so some of you perhaps remember from the last plan. And then the last one is Isaac Newton Square, so that'll be a new soccer field, parking, and open space created as part of that. So that's a pretty aggressive approach. Then on the left is the town center north, so they have the main civic space. So for all of you who want to tear down the planning commission or the board of supervisors, that's the place where you would go to do that. Athletic fields, which are struggling a little bit, how to write that. And we've recommended to just go back to the past language rather than trying to create new language. There's language about equivalent to 12 fields, and I wasn't sure what that meant. Did that mean if you're going to have small ones, you would have 24 instead of 12, or does that mean you'd have fewer? I don't know. It has not been worked out. Other parks and fields, so there's a lot of smaller ones. A whole variety of smaller ones. The community gathering spaces, these are the ones that Robert Simon was always talk about, the plazas at the community centers. And then the last one is the 2 18-hole golf courses. So that's the range of parks that we would have in Reston over the next planning period. Yes.
Back here.
There.
Again, John Farrell, President of Reston Association. You and I have met regarding this chapter and,
Yes.
and its deficiencies, which are multiple. The most important one being that the predominant, overwhelming role that Reston Association plays in providing parks and recreation to the community here is either denigrated, dismissed, ignored, etc. For those who don't know, Reston Association owns 1,350 acres of open space in this community.
And how many miles of trails?
And 55 miles of trails, and 15 pools, and 54 tennis courts, and I won't keep going, but you know I could. The way the current language is written, it would suggest that the park authority has to approve whatever RA wants to do with this property in response to our community. And that is thoroughly inappropriate. And that language needs to be changed so that the people of Reston who elect us, 7,000 people voted in the last election, who elect us to advance their interests, are clearly recognized as the responsible party for the overwhelming majority of the acreage. Park Authority, for those of you who don't know, own less than 80 acres. And 60 of that is the Baron Cameron District Park, which Reston Association people rarely get to use, Reston people rarely get to use. So you're talking about 20 acres fundamentally that the Park Authority uses. On the one hand, on the other hand, 1,350 acres of Reston Association. But I have a question. In the current comprehensive plan, there's this language on page 8. Forgive me for reading, but I have copies I can hand out. Development within the TSAs can become better integrated into the fabric of the larger Reston community by providing future TSA residents and employees access and robust connectivity to existing community activities. Necessarily, that's the Reston community, the RA facilities, including the lakes, all of them owned by RA, the network of trails throughout Reston, all of them maintained by RA membership. This can best be achieved through, underline, incorporation into existing Reston Association or the Reston Town Center Association. Each of these entities have indicated a willingness to include these new developments in their association. That's absolutely true. Why is this language not in the current draft of the comprehensive plan? Was there a policy decision made to say we're not going to hold this out as an objective going forward? I don't expect you to answer the question, John, because you and I have had this conversation. My question goes to the task force and more importantly to the staff. I don't understand the antagonism toward Reston Association demonstrated by the current draft language.
Well, let me start off with three things as far as I can get. One thing you asked for, and one of the things that you didn't say that you asked for is a change. When RA makes a change to their fields, right now some folks think that that's an automatic rezoning case, which is very expensive to go through. And I think we have on the work program a change to the zoning ordinance that will fix that. So that's what we're getting a little nicer to RA. The other thing is in crafting this originally, the question was how much to involve RA in terms of how much do you want the county regulating RA? And the decision was let's not do that. So there's not an extensive list of all the RA facilities or improvements that there might, and I think that's the right approach. And then that last thing that you said, I think that's going to be in the new version of this plan. I don't know what happened along the way, but that paragraph that you're talking about, I've got it right here, and I believe that's going back. Chris, is that pretty much where we're going?
It could be part of that addendum.
Yeah. So remember, this is, the plan's not fixed. There are addendums coming out. There are changes that occur from people like you that are suggesting logical changes at the Planning Commission. This is a chance to get your initial ideas out. So hopefully those three things will help RA a little bit. That's why you see kind of a relaxation of trying to regulate RA in all of this.
But John, except that the language that implies that the park authority gets to approve RA facilities is still in the draft language.
Yeah, well, hopefully it's just, hopefully it's coming out. Yeah, that's my understanding. Yes, you're very talkative tonight. Welcome.
To what extent will there be a requirement that new residential areas must
That's the fourth thing, which I didn't mention, and I'm sure John mentioned that. I meant to mention that too. There's another paragraph, and I think that's part of the paragraph that you were reading. We cannot the county attorney will not allow us to put in a requirement to fund RA on areas like the transit station. If I was even successful in sneaking it in there, or if St. Clair was able to sneak it in there, the county attorney would not enforce it.
Except it's.
So we've got to dance around with that, and hopefully there's going to be some we do these follow-on motions to address that kind of thing.
John?
Yes.
God, don't get into an argument.
In the county zoning ordinance
Yeah.
that requires a developer of residential properties in a P district, and all these are in P district, to spend $1,900 per dwelling unit for recreational facilities. Now, the developer has two choices. One, they can build a facility in their own project, and if they do, God bless them. Done. But many of them choose not to. And instead, they make a cash input contribution to the park authority. And I have had it reported to me by representatives of developers that when they try to give some of the money to RA, the supervisor's office calls them up and says, no, you can't do that. But the zoning ordinance specifically says that those improvements can be on adjacent property. RA has adjacent property. So I don't understand the county attorney's position. It does not appear to be grounded in the zoning ordinance or in law. It appears that we've got the county attorney making policy, which is not their job.
Perhaps. I'm not sure what else to say. Fix it, okay, well, at least we have a heads up in the plan. Yes? What's that?
Is there a proposed location for the Fairfax County Rec Center?
Is there a proposal for the Fairfax County
Rec center.
What?
Rec center. Good.
You see the green space
Should be there.
in the upper part of the Reston Comprehensive, that is the field adjacent to the rec center. Yes, that's, if you look in the plan now, it mentions a whole series, and I think I'm coming up to that in a second. But this RA issue is not going away. Environmental stewardship. So, is there a better picture than that? I'm not talking about the photographer, but I'm talking about the place. There are very few places in the world, like with the bridge, the pond, and that's the stormwater management pond, to protect Lake Ann.
There's that in the plan?
What's that? So I'm not going to go through all of them. This is not my strength, the environmental section, but you have sustainable land. These are the sections within the chapter. So the landscapes, let's talk about vegetation, the watersheds, the water resources, stormwater management. That has probably been the most controversial part of this. The notion that we are in the headwaters of Difficult Run here. Unfortunately, the headwaters are in the TSA. They're actually in the TSA. So we're going up on the regulations for stormwater management and for Reston. What else to say? We already have a large wetland area in the Herndon area. There's a lot of attention on green buildings and neighborhoods. We have projects that, particularly in the TSAs, where they're keeping a couple buildings and building several new buildings around them. So the existing buildings get a free ride, so to speak. So perhaps we can use this green neighborhood notion to bring the whole area up at the same time. We've heard comments about adding a little bit more on EV charging stations. I think we have that in the plan. Bird-friendly design, folks have talked about. And then sort of the green buildings. We have our first cross-laminated timber building coming in Brookfield, and all the buildings will be silver or better. I think the county plans on doing better than that. So
And that's silver leads.
Yeah, silver lead. You've kind of exhausted my expertise. Public facilities. So we have have somebody from Public Facilities here. Good. So, obviously, North County Government Center and Police Station is already here. 2 to 3 new elementary schools, a new middle school, and a new high school. The middle school and high school won't necessarily be in Reston, but in the western part of Fairfax County. But the population growth will generate the need for that. So far, we have 1 elementary school targeted for Northtown Center. We already have our fire station, new regional library in Northtown Center, expanded Health and Human Services Center, Reston Community Center. We already have that, of course. Kathy Hudgens Community Center, we already have that. Fairfax County Recreation Center, 90 to 100,000 square feet for that. A little ways off, perhaps, before we see that. Expanded Embry Rucker Shelter, 12 full-size, full-service athletic fields, and the Fairfax County Performing Arts Center. So you have pictures of the North County Government Center, upper left, and the fire station. The picture in the middle is the swimming pool at McLean on Springville Road, as is that basketball field. The library is in the District of Columbia. It's in Southwest. It's probably one of the more interesting buildings. The District of Columbia just spent several years remodeling all 10 of their libraries. And then that's Terracet Elementary School on the bottom right. So now, affordable housing. Lots of discussion about this at the Board of Supervisors. Are we being a little too tough on the transit station area? And Gwen in Walter Alcorn's office is looking at what we have. A lot of concern is residents seem to want to talk about this equity and providing affordable housing. What's the ground truth? Did they really do it over since 1962? And the answer is yes. There's between 12 and 17% of our housing stock is in that affordable housing range, which can range pretty high. And there in the upper right, you can see what the household incomes are in Reston. So you want to try to hit that 50 to 74 and less incomes. We have for sale units that fit that. We have rental, mostly in the guard apartment range, the older guard apartment range. We have Fairfax County supported housing, and that gets up as high as 17%. But what are we going to do in the future as our housing increases? That middle slide there shows you the range of the unit types. Hopefully you can see that. That's a pretty good range, I think. Single-family detached, single-family attached townhouses, multifamily 5 and 8 stories, and multifamily 1 to 4 stories. So we have a pretty good range here in Reston. Let's see, those are the WDU commitments. So there's a bonus density that comes with that. So everybody gets from 17 to 20% bonus in return for providing at least 12% affordable housing, and it meets the certain income tiers. Yes?
Who gets a bonus? I'm not sure. What does that mean?
Increase in density. So if you had 100 units, you could increase by as much as 20%.
So this is.
In return for doing that, you gotta have 12 or more percent affordable.
So this is a developer bonus.
Right, right. So, and then on the upper left, and this is from the old plan, we carried it forward in this plan. So as your density goes up from 1 FAR to 4, your percentage goes up of affordable housing units. So you can see we'll have a minimum of 12% in the TSAs, but there's a lot of areas that are in the 2.5, 3, 3.5, there's some 4s. So we'll be moving up on the sliding scale. So we hope overall, it's not going to reach the 17% that we have, but it's going to be meet what we need to provide. I didn't present this at the Board of Supervisors, but they're very concerned that we're being too tough on the transit station areas. But that's why we're doing that.
Sean, one of the things that came up at the Board of Supervisors Land Use Committee meeting
Yes.
was one or two supervisors questioning the commitment that Reston has made to multiple different housing types. And I love your bar graph,
Yeah.
but I think it undersells the commitment to diverse housing types that we have by breaking out the two multifamily categories and not showing them
Actually,
as
three.
combined.
Yeah.
Right. If you combine the three of them, it's more than half of the dwelling units in Reston are multifamily of one kind or another.
Yeah.
There is no other 11-acre part of this county that has a commitment
No.
even close to that.
No.
So when the supervisor from Providence District asks the question, I'd like to be able to more clearly answer the question and stop the discussion when Providence District doesn't have anything like that ratio.
Well, I like to be tactful with the Board of Supervisors, and I also like to be straightforward. So that's what this is going for. The other aspect of that, which is the new town planning thing that I talked about, not only do we have that mix, we have that in close proximity of each other. We have garden apartments next to single-family detached, next to even bigger single-family
And that's
detached.
what the innovation
Yes,
created by Mr. Simon in
Yes.
1965.
Oh, he should just get up and go.
but there's a lot of people saying, well, did you really do that? Did you really show me? So that's what this is attempting to do in a very simple way. Because not everybody knows what the story is from the beginning, but did you really walk the walk in a way? And I think we certainly did. But yes.
Yeah, a question regarding the bonus plan that you've
Yes.
shown, that applies to the transportation new areas? The new development along the corridor?
It applies throughout Reston. So let me, I think it's on the next slide.
Does it apply?
Yes, so now in the neighborhoods, we're only asking for 8%. This is for new development, to the extent that we would have new development in the neighborhoods. 8%, and you get a 12% bonus. In the TSAs, it's a 12% sliding scale, and you get up to a 20% bonus.
For
So
new-
for
for
new
new
only,
development?
yes.
I'm just curious.
Yes.
Did that apply to Reston Town Center itself, to multi-story like above? I had thought that there was.
This started, these rules started around 2007.
Okay.
So anything before that, even in 1962, between 1962 and 2007, those rules did not apply. So this is something new. But despite all that, we still have an abundance of affordable housing here in Reston. Now, the inclusionary zoning hits the developers. So anybody, and I believe the 50 units is the cutoff. So you gotta have 50 units for this to apply. We're also, through the land use plan, preserving those existing multifamily units that are throughout. And we have for sale as well as rental units. And the one that I always keep trying to bring up is Vantage Hill, which is developed a little bit less than the 20 units per acre that we talked about earlier. But they're an older garden apartment project. They haven't kept up the reserves, so they struggle with roofs, HVAC, major maintenance on their site. So they had a pool there. I guess they didn't join RA, I'm not sure what they did, but there was probably something went on there. The pool was abandoned. It was too much to maintain, so I hopefully they join RA now. So they're taking that pool and they're building a small amount of townhouses. And that money for the for sale will go to the Vantage Hill Condominium Associations to fund their repair work. And so that's what that second does. We also, in a more lighter weight, and I always bring this one up, that there's a small, single-family detached neighborhood. It's near, it's between Dogwood Elementary School and USGS. They're very small lots, very small houses. It's really a vital community. Lots of people running around there. Somebody wanted a daycare center, a little one, 12 kids. So we supported that. So what I'm trying to communicate, it's not necessarily about new density. Sometimes it's about new facilities, a bus stop, a daycare, something like that that makes those neighborhoods stay in shape so people want to live there. So that's the second. And then the third one is new affordable housing. Got lots of developers here. Maybe there could be joint ventures with some of the developers on some of these approvals to build new affordable housing. We've got major new developments at Wheelie. We've got Brookfield. We've got Wilson Properties. All those are large projects with, they're not building out very fast in some cases. So we'll certainly get our inclusionary zoning, but we may get a possibility of joint venturing with the county. We're doing that in Tysons. Recently worked with affordable housing, the Arlington Partnership, building an affordable housing project that was originally just to be a market rate housing, but they decided to go with Arlington. So anyway, it's three approaches. It's the inclusionary zoning, which people like to talk about the most. It's preserving the houses that we have. And then third, perhaps there are opportunities for new ones. Heritage resources, and that Reston is now old enough to have heritage resources. It's pretty amazing, actually. Although we have some older ones. We have the church and town hall, Lake Ann Village. We have the old Bowman House, and the USGS are the most famous examples. There are maps in Reston that are spell this out in a little better detail. The ones left to talk about are the Hunt Club, which is just outside Reston, and then the Association Drive area. So I don't remember if we had a heritage resources in the last one. Did we? Do you remember? We did. And then there's the public art. We had a little bit of that in the plan. Just personally, I think we should have more representational art. So this one of Robert Simon is probably the most visited of any art piece in Reston. But we have a whole range of art pieces, and every developer of a certain size has an obligation to work with the arts community here in Reston. Now the tough one, this one, we had a lot of trouble with this, particularly with the Board of Supervisors. I think they want to do these things, but they're very concerned about us getting out ahead of things. And there are people on both sides of this. Some think this is a little weak, and maybe it is. Some of them thinking, wait a minute, we're branching off into a policy that shouldn't be part of, it should be part of Reston, but that should come down on high as part of the policy plan. So what we did is called the last chapter, Planning a New Town. And what were the aspects of New Town mostly that we want to care for? This equity notion. The notion we lack data, although I tried to provide a little bit of that in our affordable housing piece. And a whole host of other things, mixture of housing types, we have that. We have the multimodal transportation system. We know there are competing demands for land use. Distributing community facilities throughout, and then involving people that are underserved. Community health. Reston is all about active living, so any place in Fairfax or probably anywhere, we have planned a community for active living. I was looking at the South Lakes sports outside, if you saw that. We have world record holders that went to high school here. We have a whole host of other athletes of Reston. It's just amazing, that list. but it's more than just treating the really super athletes, but it's going across the board in this active living, through the trails, through the open space, through these signature parks that I talked about earlier. Healthy food infrastructure, we have some here, some would like more. That's all about grocery stores, but it's also about the garden plots and those things that we have. Green infrastructure and healthy buildings. We probably work a little bit better on the infrastructure. Healthy buildings, there are new standards called WELL that's not in this plan, but that's all about HVAC systems, and we're learning through COVID about that. There's not much about that. And then these gathering spaces. Robert Simon was very big on the gathering spaces, particularly the plazas, that's where the community is created, because people from all walks of life gather, and then these institutions are created from that process. And then the last one, economic development. Unusual to put that in a comp plan, I would say. Housing options, we have that. Access to metro, we need to keep working on that. This notion of placemaking and the biophilic design, that doesn't sound like an economic development thing, but it is. These are the kind of things that employers that come to Reston, they want to see that. Transportation, of course, jobs and housing balance. And I put this last one on, apprenticeships and mentorships. A lot of these larger projects, there's all this negotiation that goes on. And there's lots of standards in the book, in the comp plan or in the design guidelines about that. But occasionally you run across a person that can't do that, and it doesn't make sense to do some of those things. So we had a small hotel, actually, in Lake Fairfax Business Park, and instead of, they did the green buildings, but they didn't build the grid of streets because they really weren't on the grid of streets. So they proposed and created an apprenticeship and mentorship program coming out of the hotel for the kids that grew up here, a chance to work in the hotel business, make a little money, but get their mentorship, and who knows what they would become. So we can do some of those softer things. The county attorneys and the board of supervisors kind of blanch a little bit at those kind of things, but we've got it in the plan, and we'll see how it carries forward. And that's kind of the end of where I am. So we have the community meeting, which is today, of course, June 6th. The Planning Commission public hearing is June 14th. Hopefully you're all charged up for it. I wanted to end up on a positive note on this. We don't always end up doing that. These plans, they often take a long time to create. Everybody gets kind of tired of them at the end, but this is the time to be excited about. That's the reflection of what your community is going to be like. My experience, there's never been a perfect comp plan. I think that people go around and they try to add a sentence here or there, and it's called the I gotcha sentence. If they can just squeeze that in. I'm not talking about RA's paragraph, but they try to find a sentence that will sort of make their day. And I think the time is over with to do too much of that. If there's something wrong, yes, let's correct it. But be careful of thinking that you could add a sentence and it would have much impact. 140 pages, there's too much weight and too much flexibility. So keep towards the bigger picture on these things. So public hearing on June 14th. We're going to leave the Planning Commission almost a month before it goes to the Board of Supervisors. So logically, there'll be some testimony at the Planning Commission, and we'll go through and record. And I won't bore you with the sheets that we're developing. So it's basically what chapter you're talking about, what is the comment, what's the staff reaction, and then what is the Planning Commission's recommendation. So that happens between June 14th and June 28th or later, up as long as July 25th is the date for the public hearing for the Board of Supervisors. Yes?
What's the location of the Planning Commission public
It's at the government center in the big room.
Fairfax. Fairfax.
Fairfax County Government Center, yeah. Yes,
You could bring out your crystal balls. What are what are the odds we're gonna get this through pretty much the way it is? What are our stumbling blocks? Who do we have to suck up to? The board of supervisors. If we all like this, how do we get it done?
well, that would be nice if you presented that at the planning commission and the board of supervisors.
I'll do it.
There's energy now, and that's what I was trying to say, that a lot of times we kind of, we finished this, and we spent a lot of time, and I didn't get quite what I wanted, and I wish I got that. It would be better to move this thing along. There's a lot going out there, applications are coming forward. We really need to get this done, I think. And there's a lot of time spent on it. I think we've, even John's issues, I think we have many of those handled. Not to criticize John. Yes.
So, oh, sorry, Lisa. I just wanted to,
Let's hear from
Put
Lisa.
a hold on this specific site plan amendments for the moment. Are they going to?
The site-specific plans are awaiting this to go, but there are other ones that don't need a site-specific amendment.
I've been to the association one, the association drive.
Yes, well, that one will have to wait. The Comstock is here on Wheeling. They're going on at the end of June.
so John,
Hold on.
sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, so, sorry, I deferred to Lisa, but I didn't give up my turn. In terms of community involvement, I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that it is most important for the community to make their voices heard to the Planning Commission, because once it's approved by the Planning Commission, it sounds like it's pretty much, I mean, there aren't going to be many chances for anything to change between the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, correct? No? You think
there are
there's-
chances to change.
Okay.
And Walter Alcorn is all ensconced in this now.
Good, okay.
And I believe there is a special meeting that Walter Alcorn is going to have towards the end of June. I don't think it's quite
Okay.
scheduled yet. I think it's probably going to wait for the Planning Commission. But no.
Good to know.
Many of
Thank
these
you.
comments, I get them directly often, but some of them go directly to Supervisor Alcorn as
Okay.
well. So
Thank you.
I wouldn't assume that whatever comes out of the Planning Commission is what goes with the Board of Supervisors. We've been to the Board of Supervisors twice, we've been to the Planning Commission twice, and they have different approaches. Each body has a different approach to these things, so.
That's good clarification, thank you.
I think they would appreciate it if we could solve the world at the Planning Commission. I think they would like that, the Board of Supervisors, but they have their own mind. Yes,
I heard you say that the Herndon station is part of the Reston Comprehensive.
yes, it is, yes.
Given that Herndon is the town of Herndon, has its own jurisdiction with its town council, how is that going to be dealt with?
Well, we deal with the areas outside of the,
Outside of the actual
yeah,
town limits.
right. And
South.
so in the case of the Herndon Metro Station, half of it's in Reston and the other half is in the town of Herndon. So we didn't talk about the part that's in the town of Herndon, but we did talk about the areas that's in Fairfax County. Split them, and the metro toll road, that basically splits it. Yes.
I'm gonna be optimistic and say that this is gonna be approved. When it is approved, does that put an end to developing the golf courses? Or are we
For
gonna
now, yes.
continue
I would say
with that?
absolutely, yes.
5 years.
Yes.
5 years?
But, part of democracy is ever vigilance.
But
The question was, if this is approved, does that put an end to the discussion about the golf courses? And I said yes, so that's what the plan is gonna
For
recommend.
5 years.
And I don't think that's gonna change, at the Planning Commission or at the Board of Supervisors. But the price of democracy is ever vigilance. Yes,
My name is Bruce Bennett. I live outside of Reston. The reason I'm here is I haven't been in Reston, not necessarily stay in Reston. But given this schedule, What's the projection for the tier 3 hearings for the zoning?
What is that?
Given this schedule for these meetings,
Yes.
if there's a hearing set for the planning commission for tier 3 development. Right?
Okay, the question is what happens to all of these site-specific plan amendments? There's 10 of them, most of them in Reston, and there's a famous one that's out to Reston. It's been to the supervisors many times, but they're all in what's called a tier 3, which means none of those will go forward until this plan is finished.
What's
Now,
the projection for tier 3 date for the hearing?
well, the staff could start in the fall, but there's 70 of these in the county. 7 of these site-specific plan amendments. So when we'll get to the rest of them, I don't have any idea.
Election year land use?
Yeah, that's another issue. The question becomes, what happens during an election year? Supervisors don't like to take things up, particularly land use things, during election season. So I think there's no way that any of these can get before the elections. I just don't think. They're not going to start till the fall. There's no way that they're going to be finished by November. Yes.
The task force has done an excellent job of looking at this. The presentation has a lot of positive, positive impacts on what's going to happen in Reston. What are you hearing in terms of those who are objecting to what is being proposed?
Well, again, I'm answering this question. So the question is, what do I hear from others when they're reading the plan? What's the positive and negatives? I hear some. I hear things about, have we gone far enough in the health area? I don't hear a lot of comments about land use. I hear 1 or 2 comments in transportation. I think most of the meetings I go to, and maybe it's just me, I don't know, most people say, hey, let's get on with this. Let's get this approved. That's what I hear. That doesn't mean there aren't going to be things coming up. Association drive, things that touch people where they live, those things are going to be coming up. And that's what the Planning Commission is there for, to resolve those. But what I hear is, hey, let's get going.
Okay.
Yes?
Well, are you going to go over the chapter leads at all? Because
I think not, and I'm going to, if you want to comment, sure, please.
Sure. Well, I'll comment on health and maybe
Yes.
some of the issues with health. I guess I can stand up. Yeah.
Michelle's concern was that we originally was going to go through the chapter lead. There were chapter leads for each chapter, and there were people involved in those in addition
For 3
to
years.
leads, both as subsets but also individually. And so Michelle wants to talk about the health chapter particularly.
We were sent to
Michelle Kimmel.
I can use the mic if that helps. Sure. So, health is presented as a new chapter under New Towns, but it's not new to Reston. Health was part of the original Reston plan. Both directly when talking about specific healthcare facilities and also more indirectly when talking about broad community health components that we've talked about, from active living to gathering spaces. And in a number of ways, we are still moving forward to achieve the vision that was set out. But in a few very specific ways, this plan is lacking and actually sends us backwards. And there's one in particular that I just want to make sure everyone is aware of. The original plan for Reston had set aside land in Reston Town Center North for a voluntary inclusive medical center or hospital. And the word voluntary is very important because at the time that term meant something. It meant that if you went there and you needed health care and you couldn't afford it, you would still be treated. Now, today we treat those as not-for-profit hospital systems. Our major not-for-profit providers, of course, Inova. But Reston Hospital is not a not-for-profit. Reston Hospital is a major for-profit entity owned by HCA, which is one of the largest healthcare providers in the country. It's publicly traded, and just Google it, you can read a lot of things. But it's important because right now, the way this plan is written, it incentivizes Inova to leave Reston. So Reston right now, we are benefited because we have access to 2 providers. We have access to HCA through Reston Hospital. We also have Inova's standalone ER. So we can get emergency services there and then be part of the Inova system. That also makes it so a lot of our primary care physicians are incorporated here. There's a lot of benefits in having Inova here. Inova also owns that land. The land was set aside by the developers, then they sold it to the county or gifted it to the county, it appears, and then the county at one point sold it to Inova, all for the purposes of providing, again, that voluntary medical services. Right now, it's written in a way that Inova is given and granted all housing density. So what does that mean? It takes that land, which is currently used for healthcare services, and now all of a sudden increases the value immensely. Because now this is going to be demolished and turned into high-density housing. So when we lose that, we lose access to our major provider, and we also lose that vision, because the vision was always that everyone in Reston could get health care. And right now, that's not the case at Reston Hospital. If you cannot afford it, you will not get health care. You will be able to, if you go to the ER, you will certainly be stabilized, but you're not going to stick around for long. So this is a major issue, and so there is an answer, and we've asked for just parity. We said, you know what? In this plan, we incentivize the ice skating rink. You guys know, over on Sunset Hills. We provide language in there that says that this is an important community facility and that it should stay there. And so we would like to see that same language used to describe the emergency room. And so, okay, Inova, we want to give the density to Inova, okay, but let's make sure that we also keep access to the Inova system and an ER there. So that's what we've asked. We've been told that, this isn't possible, but apparently we can do it for an ice skating rink. So we have some issues with that, and we think that should be addressed. Secondly, we have a major issue when we think about the Wheeling Metro Station. Right now, already, the metro area and neighborhood itself is not really in walking distance to a grocery store if you live right adjacent to the metro. We're about to get even worse, because in case you didn't see, Whole Foods is moving. So if Whole Foods gone, we have now a grocery desert. So what's the problem with the grocery desert? People are going to have to drive to get groceries. Now, on the Planning and Zoning Committee, we've heard everything from the people who are living there, don't like grocery stores, they want to go to bars anyway. We've heard that they'll just have everything delivered. But there's studies that have been done that show that even deliveries, if they're done at times that are most convenient to the person ordering them, they do not limit car trips. So here again, we have a situation where now we're going to have a lot of people who can't walk to a grocery store, so they're going to have to drive. This both undercuts the vision of the pedestrian gets their way and walkability. That was in the original plan. And it also undercuts the vision of a TSA, which is creating a transit station area where you don't have to drive. So again, we have a solution that we think is pretty easy. It's parity again.